So back in July, we were talking about the rare astrology of the basket configuration, where we had 4 outer planets all aligning at 4 degrees and 4 different astrology signs, and the grand significance of it all. And of course, then you can throw in Chiron, which was also a part of that alignment, and then wonder, well, what really changed? What really happened? Did anything happen? But something to keep in mind is that when you have outer planets all aligning and matching up like this, the changes are subtle and slow moving to the point where you don't recognize them at first until you do. Until all of a sudden something connects and you're like, oh wow, I see the shift, I see the change, I see what's different. So I wanted to do a video for you here discussing 7 subtle changes that are unfolding for us on the planet that perhaps you've already been experiencing and sensing, but I hope this gives you some good things to consider and apply in your life. So this is going to be more of a focus on the practical energetics that are changing. It's not going to be as astrologically focused, but of course it's about the astrology of these times that we're in. And so I'm going to cover 7 themes. And the first one that I want to make note of that is really big is that there is the end of long-term planning. Have you recognized that? There's no longer this long-term planning that we can rely on or count on in our lives. Almost every area of our life is in flux and is subject to the changes that are happening quite rapidly on the planet. So this means there can be less security and stability for areas of our lives that we thought would continue or always look the same. Now, by long-term planning, I mean there are parts of our lives that are going to be experiencing more shifts and changes that we can't always predict or see coming. And it's bringing us into the present moment, the choices that are available to us now, reminding us to choose what resonates, to choose where your intuition is directing you forward, and to know that even as you make choices, those choices are going to continue to change. And so as you choose to perhaps make a career change or to do something new in your life, you could be sensing, well, I don't know how long this will last. I don't know how far this will go. With the outer planets in fire and air signs, we're living in now an energy of ongoing dynamic shifts that are very unpredictable. And so that's another way to look at this energy, is that it is the end of long-term planning because there's greater instability and unpredictability. And that's going to continue to be the norm. And so that can stir up a lot, right? And that can bring up a lot to just be aware of and have to consider and think through. But the era of long-term planning for our lives is no longer the normal. Number 2, another theme to be aware of and conscious of is that we're going to be experiencing greater localization and regionalism. There's going to be more changes in your local community that are specific to your area. And it means that, for example, here in the States, in one area of your county or state, you're going to have experiences happening that are going to be very different from another community or another part of that same state. This can seem like greater fragmentation. This can also draw upon the strengths of each local environment, of what each community does well, or where the priorities and values are of that area. There's going to be a sense that we're living in different realities, that we are experiencing very different things. And so there's going to be some areas of the country, of the world, that quickly accelerate into new realities. I mean, I think about, for example, the city of Austin, Texas, which has been playing with these Waymo self-driving vehicles for a long time, and they're testing out various new technologies in business and in different community endeavors. And so that's kind of like this testing ground, and that makes Austin very different from other areas of Texas or other areas of the US. So there's parts of every country and state that are going to be experienced in very different ways. And so again, it feels like a fragmentation. It also is going to be interesting how that shows up as changes in how we understand these energies and what's coming through in our everyday realities. So you maybe are living in an environment, in a community that has rapid technology integration. And that could be very unique to where you live, and other people might not have that same experience. And you might talk to a friend who lives far away and they have no idea what you're discussing or experiencing. So we're going to have some very unique experiences and different realities based on where we live. And they're not going to track at the same rate or at the same speed of growth. And so again, you might realize that when you look around or when you travel and go to different places, you can see these differences and they're more pronounced. But we're going to have an increase in different ways of living that are unique to each community. Pros and cons with this, of course, but it's also going to be the influence of Uranus and Gemini, because Gemini is about your local environments, your everyday places. And you may start to see more of these new technologies being integrated into your communal spaces and the familiar environments you go to. Number 3 is that with these outer planets all in fire and air energies, there is an increase in yang expressions, in being more assertive, dominant, action-oriented, in the energy of busyness, including feeling more life force, more inspiration and momentum. But at the same time, we're going to have to then intentionally practice and call in yin energy, that earth and water energy that we need in order to remain balanced. So this means we're going to need more intentional healing practices that we turn to more regularly. And perhaps you're already sensing this in your own self and your own energy, that you could feel you get overwhelmed faster, that you're more exhausted more quickly, that the energy runs through you at a rapid pace, and then you're like wiped out and exhausted. And so we're going to have to bring in more of our own balancing mechanisms that allow us to stay in tune with our energy and with our needs. And to remember that this will be part of how we not only take care of ourselves, but it's also going to be essential for the balancing of our energies and to remain in a state of handling everything that's going on around us. So we need these intentional healing practices more regularly and more often. This could mean you realize you need more body work. You need to really do that guided meditation or really go to that yoga class. Like, it's not optional anymore. You're sensing, I really need this for me. It's how I feel grounded. It's how I can calm my mind. It's how I can feel centered and clear. So we're going to need to intentionally integrate more of these balancing practices and to ensure that we're handling all this yang energy. And the yin energy is where you stop and you drop in and you release. And you allow your shoulders to drop 3 inches, and you make sure you're not clenching your jaw, and you're in tune with your body and what your body is actually holding or where it's tightening. And it's giving yourself that time to drop in, to release, and to stop all the doing and motion because you're seeing when that overwhelm shows up and when you're exhausted. This could also mean that you notice you have a new rhythm to your daily life, like you reach a breaking point earlier in the day, or you feel like your concept of time has drastically shifted, where you're more aware of what your energy is experiencing and less about the time on the clock. And so you're tuning in to more of what you're feeling and moving through, and that's becoming stronger and more pronounced. And so all of this is a part of that strong yang energy that can be very enthusiastic and inspiring and make you really productive at times, until you get to that edge or you feel like you've gone over the cliff and all of a sudden you're exhausted and wiped out because the energy has been so big and so intense. So number 3 is staying consciously aware of how you are integrating and working with these strong fire and air energies, and becoming more conscious of when you need that nourishing, receptive yin energy that allows you to take a break, drop in, drop down, and really take care of your own energy that's outside of all the doingness and activity that's actively happening. Number 4 is that with all this yang energy, you could have a willingness to take some new risks and participate in life in a whole new way. This energy has been leading us into new potentials, possibilities, and lifestyles. It's moving us into new ways of experiencing our own energy. So this can also support beginner's mind, having a new sense of openness to what you can learn, what you could do differently, what you could try. And you might already be feeling that, like you're drawn to new activities or new hobbies, or you're really curious about something that you never thought was interesting before. Maybe you're finding that you are exploring different ways of spending your time, or you're looking for things that actually then support the yin energy that you need. So maybe it's trying a new healing arts practice, or trying something very bizarre, or you previously thought it was bizarre and now you're really drawn to it and you want to understand it more. So this is a time to stay open to what is calling your energy forward, to remain curious, to have beginner's mind, to see where it leads, and at the same time to note that the energy is going to continue to change. And so to not be overly locked into one particular outcome, or to something that you think you're going to do for the rest of your life. Okay, that goes back to the number 1 point of it's the end of long-term planning. It's a sense of openness and possibility here around what you could try and what you could check out, and know that it's probably going to shift and evolve over the next few years, but why not give it a try and see where it goes? So this energy is meant to be expansive. It's an expansive beginner's mind, where you're meeting new parts of yourself in these new frequencies. And it could be quite eye-opening. I mean, it could even be something that, let's say, you loved as a child, and then you had to give it up or let it go, or it just wasn't a part of your world anymore, but you find yourself being drawn back to it. You find yourself going to it and just seeing if you're still interested and if you're any good at it. So this requires a new active participation in your own life, in just seeing where things go and just being open to how something unfolds, and also how you're willing to show up for it. It's less about observing, watching, and listening. It's more about, I'm going to try the thing. I'm going to do this. I'm just going to see where this goes. And it has like this almost a light touch to it. And I feel it like a light touch where the ego isn't heavily invested in a particular outcome. It's just that sense of, well, let me just try. Let's just see what happens. Let me just have some fun. And that's also a part of this energy, is like, what lights you up? What is giving you a new lease on life? Because that is also a part of this energy shift. And it's meant to return us to the joy of living, the joy of being human, the joy of being able to try new things and just test it out and see where it goes. So that's another shift that's quite subtle, but maybe you're sensing or feeling that there's things that you just want to try just because, and it actually adds more to your life because of it. Now, number 5 is something that has already been shifting in the collective, and maybe you've been noticing this theme growing over the past few years. But this is a theme of personal accountability, where we are expecting and holding ourselves and each other to higher standards of personal accountability and self-responsibility. We're no longer just letting things slide. In fact, we are seeking and wanting greater accountability from ourselves and from others. Now, I would attribute this to how Chiron in Aries has been requiring us to do a lot of our inner work. We've all had to work through things that previously limited our self-identity. And these are our own personal wounds that we've had to understand and dive deep into and basically feel more confident in, that changed us, that opened us up to more of what we need, who we are, and what we want to experience. And so this has contributed to a rise in personal accountability because you know yourself better. You know what you've been through, you know what you've learned, maybe even you see it as like different phases of life that you have moved through and how you've grown. And as we become more self-aware, we have a tendency to hold ourselves to greater levels of personal responsibility. And so this is something that's slowly been happening in the collective, but maybe you've observed or experienced this in your own relationships, friendships, maybe partnerships and business colleagues, is that you expect people to be held accountable for their actions, words, choices, and behaviors. And this is something that I've certainly observed and I've experienced too, of we need that from each other. In fact, that's really healing and validating. It also verifies that there is a living responsibility level. It's like we're living with new levels of personal responsibility, and there's strength in that. There's pride in that. There's also a new level of consciousness in that. So we could be seeking that out in our connections and in our interactions with others, where, none of us is perfect. None of us arrived with all the answers. None of us knows everything. And so there's a new level of even humility that's acceptable and that's needed. It's very validating, and it actually enhances our human connections, where you can be more open, humble, and vulnerable with people because of who you are and what you've been through, and it feels good to receive the same from others. So I think this is part of the up-leveling in our human connections, where we're holding ourselves accountable to new levels and we seek that out in others. And so conversely, you could recognize where that is not met, meaning where there are people who cannot do that, who do not show up that way, who don't take any responsibility or accountability. And this can be a very clear deal breaker. This could be something that you just don't tolerate, you're not interested in, you can't relate to them, because you're seeking that level of connection in all the people in your life who matter to you. And it's kind of this maybe unconscious built-in expectation that is now defining your own personal standards. So of course, check in and see if that's true for you. But there's something that is leveling up in our human interactions and in our human connections, and it is rooted in how we are personally responsible for ourselves, how we take accountability, how we voice it and communicate it, and how we then expect that from others. So this is another one of those subtle shifts that's been happening behind the scenes, but that you might realize is very strong in your life and that you're recognizing it more out in the world. Number 6 here is also based on who you are becoming and what you've learned about yourself in your life. And this is a theme around self-advocacy. Self-advocacy becoming more important and more prominent. Now, I don't mean the obnoxious kind, which of course is going to be a part of it, the obnoxious kind of someone saying they can do everything or they're the best or anything that's ego inflated. What I mean is self-advocacy based on self-actualization. You know who you are, you know what you need, you know what you want. You're clearer on your life priorities, your life goals, what is essential to you. And within that is a form of self-advocacy where you're standing strong in who you are and trusting the confidence of who you are. And so this kind of self-advocacy is supported by Saturn and Neptune in Aries. It's also supported by the other outer planets in fire and air signs that are giving you a boost in communicating who you are, strengthening that throat chakra, having a clear understanding perhaps even of your soul mission and your soul purpose in this life, or just more of an evolved understanding of who you came here to be. Even as that changes or moves into different definitions, it's almost like there's a sense of you could feel clearer in who you are because of everything you've been through, what you've healed, what you've learned, how you've grown, how you've evolved, various life chapters you've been through. So this feels like confident self-advocacy based on your own self-actualization process. So think about that for yourself. And if that's been a subtle shift here that you've noticed and that rings true, because I do think it's going to be something we see and recognize in each other more willingly. And that includes other traits that like your friends have that you really admire, or other things they do really well and you want them to know it. Like there's an energy here of you also want to give that validation to others and you want them to feel seen and recognized. So self-advocacy based on self-actualization is also supporting our authenticity and our sovereignty, and is helping us move into being more sovereign and true at an individual level. And so that could feel quite empowering and quite uplifting. And then the 7th theme here, number 7, is about something that's actually more uncomfortable, but ultimately expansive and rewarding. And that is related to being able to see and recognize your own unconscious patterns, habits, and belief systems that you're outgrowing and that you're willing to self-reflect on and personally challenge in yourself. Oh, sometimes it's the hardest thing, but it can be the most liberating and freeing. And so in this cycle of energy that we're in, we're going to recognize sooner rather than later how much you've grown and changed, because you're going to feel uncomfortable when old habits and patterns come up within you that feel like they shrink you or that they confine you, or you just even have this intuitive sense of, I don't like this part of myself, or I don't like doing this, or I don't like being this way. There's going to be something internal that challenges you to look at yourself and to actually then move into being an objective observer and to recognize that's an old pattern I have. That's an old belief system I have. That's how I used to handle something like this. And I can feel and sense that I'm different now. So we're going to continue to come up against those parts of ourselves that we've outgrown. And it can be very rewarding. It can be very exciting to recognize that level of growth. And then it can also be uncomfortable. So there is a very important level of self-honesty here. I think there's also meant to be an understanding of how we are evolutionary beings. We are made to evolve. We are made to continue to grow and shift. And in these frequencies, we will be supported in doing so. We will want to change more readily, perhaps. I say that and then I think about the fixed signs, and the fixed signs are the ones that are the most resistant to change until they know what is on the other side or what it looks like. But overall, almost every astrology sign is going to really be feeling like, I want to change. I want to be a better version of myself. I want to challenge that previous version of myself. And I want to see what can come from this new level of expression or this new belief system. Now, some of these belief systems that are challenged are going to be really difficult to face, especially if there has been an over-identification or an over-attachment with something in your life that you're meant to outgrow. And so there can be a lot that comes up that creates like that inner turmoil, or like you're wrestling with parts of yourself. But with these frequencies and with this energetic speed, you might be surprised at how quickly you're able to move through those difficult patches or those tough internal struggles. But we're all going to see it. And I think you could even see it faster in yourself. Like you could have this very clear, like instant knowingness of that's how I always used to do that, or what I always used to think about something. And that then you could have that discomfort and tension. And that's when you recognize that you are evolving past it and you're moving through it. And so that's also going to be a big theme here. Again, it could be subtle. It could be something that you haven't noticed until you notice it. And then your consciousness is aware of it and you can actively work with it. Okay, so how do these sound to you? Do you resonate? Is this true for you? Can you relate? If so, I would love to hear about it in the comments, because this community is so wise and so fantastic that you give each other great advice and great insights. So I just want to acknowledge that. But also there could be some things here that you've already been contemplating, and then it's really validating to hear that other people have a similar experience or are on the same page. So that's one thing I just love to continue to invite in this space, is your sharing. I know there's going to be more themes. I'm sure I'll be back with more, but this was just my own list of 7 things that I've noticed that I wanted to offer and discuss, because again, these are subtle shifts, but they're big. They're significant and they matter. And I feel that it's quite promising around where we're going, what we're moving into. I think it supports our new earth values of sovereignty, authenticity, our ongoing evolutionary strengths. And I hope it also just gives you a sense of excitement about what's to come, what you can try, what you can venture into, what is possible within these new frequencies. So can't wait to read your comments below. It is me reading them. It is me hearting them. I have someone here on my YouTube channel who helps me with a lot of things, but I handle all the comments and everything. So just so you know, that's really me. But I just really value it and I appreciate it. So would love to read it below. And as always, I'll be back with some more of these videos for you, and wishing you a beautiful journey here as we continue on through these dynamic energies of 2026.